Thank you very much for joining today. This is we do a monthly brown bag here in New Zealand. It's a good way of sharing knowledge and experiences. And Altis as a whole have been doing them much more frequently during this COVID period. They've been going well. They've been a great way of us engaging with our customers and sharing the experiences and knowledge that we have in a time when we're all working a little bit remotely. So we're starting to come out of it now here in New Zealand and hopefully across Australia as well, which is great. My name's Alex. I'm the Regional Manager for New Zealand at Altis. And today we're going to be talking about modern data platform, how this is different from a traditional approach, separating out the use case from a delivery approach side of things. Then we're going to talk about the three types of use cases that we're typically seeing at the moment that people are implementing as some of their initial use cases on a modern data platform. We're going to talk about where those approaches have worked, where they've struggled and organizations have struggled with them and some lessons. Then we're going to talk about design patterns and how they come into play with the modern data platform, how organizations are managing cost, and then how to pick the componentry to use within the modern data platform. And then importantly, we're going to talk about what success looks like. I am that guy in the bottom right-hand corner. That's me without my COVID beard and haircut. I have got rid of it now. I was looking a bit rough there for a few weeks, but we've come out of hibernation and here we are. So Altis, we've been around for over 2 decades. We've been working in data that whole time. In the last several years, more and more of the organizations that we work with have been moving to a modern data platform. They've been looking to expand out the data sets that they're using, consume them and do more interesting things with them, and tackle more interesting business problems with their data. And it's been fantastic to be part of that journey with organizations and help them in creating those footprints. That's seen us recognised by Gartner for the 2nd year in a row as one of their recognised data and analytics service providers, which has been fantastic for us and a point of great pride for us. So what is a modern data platform? Well, it's here I'm using an Azure architecture to describe it, but they're an equivalent of this in AWS. There's a Google GCP equivalent to this. There's even an Oracle version, though to be honest, we're not coming across too much of the Oracle. And there are versions of this that you can build on-prem. Some of the key aspects of this are that they're mostly up on the cloud. They mostly have some version of a data lake or a big data repository where organizations are able to bring in not just structured, but semi-structured and unstructured data sets as well to give a broader set of data that organizations can then use to analyze and do better business decisions from. It incorporates new and additional componentry that can be used on a use case by use case basis, things like machine learning and IoT devices, more data bricks for your data scientists to do interrogation, as well as being able to do different things with the data and use it in slightly different ways. Things like streaming analytics to get more of that real-time effect, doing things like Event Hub so that when events happen with your data, they can trigger other events to come off that. Much more, different types of usage of data within the platform. What that's done is it's opened up broader ways for organizations to then roadmap the use of data going forward over the next few years for each of them. Most of that starts with looking at how they're storing the data in the back end. A lot of organizations are now having different zones with their back end data platform. Those zones are driven by the different types of usage. So sometimes you have gold standard zones and zones that are set up for more of that traditional data warehousing type reporting, which has got more dimensional modeling and structure around it for easy use. Some other zones are more around being able to get more data and therefore that analytical usage and things. So they're structuring data in a way that has governance and modeling around it that is designed for the usage of that on the other side. Also, those roadmaps are much more around not just the reporting and the simple analytics that organizations have typically done, but more some of that self-service reporting, the AI, the machine learning, and that augmented analytics. Augmented analytics is where you are supporting users who make decisions on the data. You're augmenting it by giving them some machine-driven information that then allows them to enrich their decision-making. It's not automating and not replacing some of that decision-making. It's supporting the decision-making that they're having to do already. And what that then does is that allows organizations to look at things like data privacy, making sure the right people are looking at the right data at the right time. It's around also being able to then expose some of that data in the right way externally out to maybe just partners or customers and open up things like new lines of business with your data and actually finding extra value in that data. It's opening up that data to be interrogated in different ways, like with natural language chatbots, or do more predictive stuff with it. And of course, as you do all of those things, it's around doing things in an ethical way and making sure that you're doing the right thing with the data for your customers and for yourselves, and making sure that you're serving the community in there. And on that side of things, that's where, for us as an organisation, we're very keen on things like data for good, doing things right for the world through the use of data. In the back end, what we're finding is the structures of data is changing a bit to support the different usage of it. Things like a dimensional model are still important for organizations, but it's still important to also look at making sure you're practically designing the data in the right way for the different types of usage. So even in things like a data lake, there's different storage types and ways that you're managing data in there. And so why is all of that important? Well, what we're seeing is that on the other side, a lot of organizations are wanting to mature in things like analytics. They are wanting to mature the way that they service outcomes. So traditionally, and what we're finding is a lot of organizations are doing much more of that localized analytics. They might have some key users in their organization who are working in silos. They're manually creating and updating their analytics. They may be using some basic tools like Excel or Access databases to manipulate that. And that's their analytics that they're doing. What they need to do to get the right business outcomes is they need to actually be able to automate some of those things, or at least be able to do things repetitively in a predictable, trustworthy way to get the right outcomes that can then be broadened and everyone in the organization can use those. And as you do that, what will happen is, what we're seeing is the maturity of the users and the data people in an organization, where traditionally on-premise people are much more around being report developers and working to structure the data in the right way. Now you can turn the conversation to much more supporting the users with the use of data. So the data people are much more being data coaching people to use data in the right way for the right use case. They're much more evangelizing how data can support you. Evangelizing in a period like COVID, how your data can help you to enrich your decision making on how you can practically change your business going forward, which is all opened up by having a modern data platform to help you do that. Here is an example from one of our customers, a version of what they had for what they wanted to do in their roadmap as they moved to modern data platform, and where they could see what they wanted to strengthen. Some areas they didn't need to strengthen. They weren't doing much in the geospatial space. So even though they could have done more by moving to modern data platform, for them that wasn't part of their roadmap. For them, they also wanted to strengthen some of their stuff in data warehousing and BI, which is still important to them even on a modern data platform, of course. They wanted to bring on over those years, over that roadmap years, some advanced analytics, and they wanted to do some semi-structured and unstructured steps. But it wasn't just that, it's also the data governance to do those things for the different types of usage in the right way and having the right level of practical governance for the types of use case. It's around making sure there's still data quality. Everything doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to be good enough that the outcomes are trustworthy enough that people can make decisions from them. All of these things are still important in a modern data platform. It's not just a technology play. How that's different from a traditional setup? Well, traditionally, most of this stuff has been done on-prem and in a traditional data warehouse type environment or a data platform, which is constrained by being constrained on a server. Sometimes it's even in a VM world, it's still constrained by the physical server that it's housed in. It's constrained by the fact that you're using particular technologies that you've bought the licenses for, and everyone's using one or two versions. There's an ETL tool, there's one or two reporting tools, there's a database technology. People have bought those tools, and then all use cases and all usage patterns then has to fit into those constraints. In a modern data warehouse, a modern data platform, it's about flexibility. It's about flexibility of saying, look, we want to run this thing now. This is an important bit of reporting and analytics we're running. And actually, we don't need it for another 6 months, so we can turn that off and turn it back up when we need it again. It's about scale. Now we're in COVID and people are wanting to look at everything to see what the impacts are on all sorts of parts of the business. Let's scale up some services so that we can make sure that it's responsive, so that people are able to get the outcomes that they need now when they're all panicked and worried about making sure that they're going to be practically going to survive and maybe even go ahead in full strength. It's around making sure that you've got the right componentry and seeing it so you can mix up and use the right tool for the right job, rather than say everything has to fit into the whatever tool we've already got. And those things allow you to be able to do things from this Gartner chart. Things like being able to do better customer insights, or be able to open up through devices out to the customers and being able to engage them in better ways. It's around being able to open up APIs out to your suppliers and partners and being able to get a better ecosystem that way. These things are only available by the flexibility and the scale and the componentry of the modern data platform, but it comes with a cost implication, which we'll talk about coming up. And really how that can sort of all drives down is that at the moment in many organizations, most of the work in analyzing a business and making decisions is often human-centered. Humans making decisions on the available data, often that's already been given to them in the past, that they know and they're trying to interpret in a new way based on today's need of the business. It's much more reactive. What these things do is really make it so that machines and the data itself can come more to the fore and not necessarily fully replace the humans, but augment them and enrich their ability to just make things and really be able to automate some aspects of it and make it more repeatable, so that you can, the speed to be able to make decisions and being able to turn from reactive to predictive can occur. And that's where you can change it. Something like now where coronavirus has been such an impactful time, you need to be able to be more predictive and being able to see how things are going to roll out and be able to be transformed as those things come through, as more and more information comes in. So then it's around, okay, well, if we're going to move up there, if we're going to look there, what are our initial, especially our initial use cases going to look like? And what we've seen, and what's really important to note, is that, is that you've got to, don't confuse delivery approach from use case. A lot of organizations that we've talked to and worked with, there'll be people in those organizations that go, great, modern data platform, fantastic. That means we can now start to go agile. It means we can do data ops, we can do CI/CD and get that continual deployment going. Those things are more organizational project changes, and they're a delivery approach. They're not an actual use case. They're not the actual what data we're going to put in there. Don't get those two things confused. A delivery approach can change as you move up to a modern data platform, and they should be part of that conversation. And fortunately at Altis, we've got great experience in helping organizations put those in there. But the use case themselves have to be looked at as well. Don't get into the trap of moving something existing, a like for like up there, and show the benefits to be a delivery approach. You can, but you have to, if you do that, make sure you understand that that's what you're doing. The value is then going to be in the approach, not the use case. The three types of use case that we traditionally have been seeing or seen in recent years is the lift and shift with a twist. Now, that's not compared, don't confuse that with just a pure lift and shift, which is more of an approach as well. That's more of a, we've got something here, let's just move it up to the cloud so we've got something to start. Those are separate things. Lift and shift with a twist is where you've got something that's unknown, something there that because of the constraints of your on-prem or your traditional environment, you want to change and enrich by moving up. So that might be something where you have something on-prem and a traditional thing, but it can only run once a day because of the constraints in the environment. You might want to move it up to your modern data platform so that you can run it in real time or near real time with some streaming analytics. And then the twist is that streaming analytics part. You may have it that you need to bring in external data sources which have become available that you think will enrich that use case and benefit the users. And so that might be the driver, that might be the twist. It might also be something more like that you want to put it into a data lake so that you get rid of the constraint of maybe some of the structures and models that you've put around the data because they aren't servicing the business now. So you want to put it into a data lake. So it may be a lift and shift, but the twist might be the openness that you can now access that data. But be careful, the twist part is the key part that you're going to use to prove the value on the other side. The next one is hitting a roadmap milestone. Often organizations will have a roadmap that says, look, in a couple of years' time, we want to be able to be doing more machine learning, artificial intelligence. We want to have some chatbots. Oh, we'd love to have some devices. They're not fully sure what they're doing with those or how they're going to be used, but they know those buzzwords. They know their organization needs to be doing them. They may have done some investigation and have an idea on how they could be used. Sometimes those are laid over a modern data platform move and go, let's do the two together. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. And the third type is where an organization will have some strategies and they'll want to, and they think, oh, well, let's try that and tie that in with our modern data platform. And these can be the ones where you get the greatest value. So as we'll talk about in a second, they can often be the hardest to actually live up to. So where those have worked, with the lift and shift with a twist, where they've worked is where that known and the constraint are very structured, and you sort of they are a well-known lift and shift. You know, they're well-known constraint and problems, and they're a well-known actual use case. So something like if you've got a business where you've got some teams who've got a specific KPI that they need to hit, and you would like to make it part of a daily stand-up as part of moving to agile, that you review those KPIs. That could be something that you move as part of your lift and shift with a twist if you can't refresh it in near real time on your constraints of your platform. It's going to be known what the KPI is and the structure and what the calculation is. The benefit of having it up there is that you're going to engage with your team better and better team engagement, etc. That twist is a value that you can realize on the other side. Hitting the, and we've seen that work quite well with some of our customers. It's a great one to, when you get the team engagement, oh, brilliant. Hitting a roadmap milestone, something like machine learning, where it's really worked well is where the users are actually already doing the decision-making on data at the moment. What they're really wanting to try and do is get scale. We've got a customer who we presented with at a health conference last year, where they were actually looking at the data and manually making the decisions on it on that already. And what they needed to do was scale it. And so machine learning was able to support that well because they were using the same data sets as they were manually working through. So they knew the data was okay and they knew the outcomes so that they could test against it. And so it was able to really give them a good use of machine learning because it gave them the scale and they knew when it was right or not. And where the strategy ones have worked is Mostly the ones I've seen work are where it's not necessarily the biggest, most important strategy for an organisation. It's a little bit lower in the totem pole. It's something that's already a known quantity for the organisation that they just want to improve it. And what you're doing here is benchmarking. It's really good if you're benchmarking something that's a slightly lower level strategy for an organisation. Those ones are good value. Where we've seen organisations struggle, we had a lift and shift with a twist with an organisation where they had a solution that on-prem refreshed every 15 minutes. They wanted to move it to the cloud so that they could refresh every 5 minutes. When they moved it up to the cloud, they used Glue on AWS to actually do that. And Glue, for the type of calculation and the way it had been designed for that particular use case, to run every 5 minutes actually was quite significant, quite costly. Especially compared to the fact that it had already been paid for on-prem, they didn't have to pay for any extra servers. And then, so when they went to talk to the business about this, the business didn't actually need it to be refreshed every 5 minutes. 15 minutes actually was fine by the business. So there wasn't any actual value for the business in actually having it refresh more often. And so that use case actually caused a pain point for them because they didn't get the value on the other side. And it actually slowed down their project of actually getting more use cases up. Also, real time's got to be something you've got to be really careful. We've seen other organizations who do some real time, they go streaming, that's fantastic, let's do some streaming. What it does is it sets an expectation with users we've seen, where if they see some reporting suddenly being in real time, they want all reporting in real time. That can be very costly to have all reporting in real time, but you've already set an expectation. So you better be careful in some of the expectation setting you're setting with some of these things on how that's going to impact the rest of your roadmap. With the roadmap milestone, when we had another machine learning project that we saw that we were a part of, where there was where the outcome was still okay, it still worked, but the data in the back end wasn't of good enough quality or good enough scale to give us an accurate enough outcome that the users could use it enough to actually enrich their decision making that they already did. It gave them confidence to actually that the decision they were making was okay, but it didn't give them enough so they could automate some aspects to give them the scale that they needed. And so it became a failure for them in a way, even though it wasn't a failure. It didn't give them enough success that it enriched their machine learning program of work. And in fact, it slowed that down. It put it on hold while they then went to work on some other things that gave them more immediate outcomes. And the one where organizations have struggled is when they've put it on a sort of on a strategy for their organization, because some of the organizational strategies are more aspirational. And so if you pick one which is more aspirational for an organization, we want to do such and such with our business. If it's more aspirational, it tends to be less ones where they've got their information at hand already to report on. We are on the journey to get there. That becomes something very hard to report on, but because the value's there, it becomes high visibility. And so it's hard to reconcile those two. You are then engaging in something where your project is tied to the organization being able to achieve an overall strategy, which can be great, but you're setting yourself up for a very high bar. What we do, and what we'd love to engage with you guys in after this, is on a prioritization session. This simple approach still works. We've done it for a number of years, and it's still a great way of doing it. What we find is people bring together 3, 4, 5 use cases against each of those 3 different types of use case. They come together in a prioritization session. They come into a room. They all sit down, and they basically take each of those, so the 10 to 15 or so that they've got, and they rank them on business value, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest value, 1 being no value at all. And then against feasibility, 1 being really, really difficult and 10 being super easy. And so what you then get is this little matrix, which where in the top right are the ones that you're really trying to aim for. The low-hanging fruit of very valuable for the business and easy to do. Those are the ones that you should prioritize as your key ones to initially do as your use cases. But you've got to have each of those 3 types so that you can have a conversation amongst the businesses for what this modern data platform's trying to achieve. Is it something that's going to enrich your strategies? Is it something that's going to enrich your roadmap and your journey to technically being able to achieve other things? Or is it around being able to remove some of those barriers that's stopped your business and being able to do some of the things in the past? And it can be all of those things, but you've got to use this as a time to rationalize where to target first. And those sessions can be fantastic sessions where it can be very easy to debate things and see, to talk about the feasibility, the values and things. They're wonderful. We're happy to and love to facilitate you. Talk to us afterwards in your local RM if you'd like to have a conversation. Cost. Oh, the cost part. Right. So, whoops, sorry. So in the modern data platform, a key aspect, as I've been talking about, is using the right tool to cut for the use case. It's not one constrained environment and everything has to go through the existing solution. Modern data platform, here's an example. This is just something we threw together as an example. But what you're looking at is an ability for, in different use cases, being able to you might have a use case and a design pattern for when data goes into a data lake and then goes straight out into reporting. Another use case might go into a lake and then go off into Databricks so that your data scientists can do some interrogative stuff there. You might have one where it goes through streaming analytics and straight out a report for real-time reporting. Something still goes into your data warehouse for certain types of usage. These are all different types of use cases where you are able to cost it appropriately for the use case and come up with a cost-effective and the value of the cost to the use case side of things. What we tend to do is organisations have about half a dozen key design patterns and types of use case. We'd love to do an engagement with you. It usually takes around 5 to 8 days where we sit down and identify your organisation's use cases, design patterns that you meet those use cases, and cost up some examples of what they would, using your real data and using the vendors' pricing calculators that you can find online to come up with those so that you get an idea of how that would come, how you design those and architect those and cost those going forward. In an organisation, what we find typically, what we've found or what I've found, is organisations have managed cost in 3 different ways. First off, some organisations have put together an initial year or 2 years of modern data platform cost. IT often are holding this. They say, look, all use cases for the next year or 2 will be handled by this IT bucket. That's a good way of getting it. You can kick off, you can get momentum going and things going through. You've already accounted for stuff and it's all there. What can be hard is then transitioning out of that model into something else. The second type is the business unit driven. It's one where, okay, here's the use case. For this use case from business, they have this desire for data. We'll go through the calculator. This is how much it costs business. If you want that, this is how much it's going to cost you going forward. That can be a great way of doing it. The ownership of that then goes to the business unit. That can be a great way for them taking accountability for it. What we've found is it's actually a really successful way of actually them using it, because what they then do is actually think about how they're using data, and then they're really more concentrating on the value they get out of it. We find those engagements are really great. If the business then transforms into one where they really value the data more, they actually start to really move ahead with that roadmap. The trick of that, of course, is that historically those business units haven't had to pay for anything in this regard, in this space, or very little, especially not in this way. So actually transferring them and getting them used to actually paying for stuff in terms of that cost of infrastructure and things around it actually takes a little while. And so it actually can take a while to get momentum going, because you've got to get used to them opening up to say, okay, we'll pay for that. The third way is project driven. The traditional way of it being a CapEx driven thing is a project that, a certain percentage of the project would go into the data delivery side of things, that traditional CapEx model. With the modern data platform, it's really more of an OpEx play long term. These things go from a CapEx when they're delivering through to an OpEx. And so sometimes with a project-driven approach, it can be hard to then transform it. It's not impossible, and in fact, it's just really getting your organisation used to the accounting of it, and that's okay. But what we see most of the times is it's a mixture between these three, and organisations do a little bit of all three of them, and it's a transformation across the over time. So what you've got to do is, when you're talking amongst your organisation, it's not just around the use cases, but how that cost is going to be managed, how you're going to look at it as an organisation, and really start to focus on those outcomes, because the outcomes are what's going to justify this on the other side. In terms of the components to use, with all of these cloud platforms, there's native componentry. They've all got their machine learning, the database, the data lakes, they've all got their own versions of this stuff. There's also third-party components. Third-party components are great at things like controlling costs. Like there's things like Snowflake. Snowflake gives you the constructs of a data warehouse and the structures there to give really good, easy reporting, but on the cheaper data lake storage. So it can be a good way of mitigating some costs in way for certain situations. They also, third-party components often have good integration off to other systems. They're really good at integrating back to source systems and can speed up your ingestion side of things, getting more up there quicker. And they're often more tailored to the skills that your existing team already have. They're often more tailored to T-SQL, for example, and things like that, which means that your team can transition up faster. But what we've also experienced is it's really good to at least try some of the PaaS componentry and understand where they fit for you and where there's some areas of concern and where those are. What I'm saying is my experience has suggested don't go just native PaaS or just third-party components. Make sure you think about both, cost up both, and just work with what's appropriate for you and for the use cases. Because the third-party components are often PaaS as well, and can play in there, and you can ramp them up or down for the use case. The last thing is really understanding success on the other side. What does success look like? So first off, you've got to prove the benefit. The benefit should come initially being identified what the possible benefit is part of that prioritization session, where you're looking on the business benefit, the business value, 1 to 10. When you're working in the group and talking amongst it, that benefits should not just be a 1 to 10 scale, but actually you should note and write down what the benefits will actually be, and then look to that to prove that on the other side when you're implemented. That cost needs to be accounted for. You need to understand the cost. You need to estimate initially with the calculator, and then once you've implemented, you need to rationalize against the actuals and see where they've gone higher or lower or the same, and why, and make sure that that's correct. And then you need to really understand how that costing is and who's going to pay for it, and start to look at engaging with the organization to make sure that ongoing you've got a right successful model for costing it. Then you need to, success is also around understanding the implementation, what that looked like, the skills needed, and being able to converse around that and be able to then put that into a project plan and pipeline for future use cases. And the most important thing, I think, and I've found, is being able to talk about the additional value that you got from putting in a modern data platform compared to doing it in the old constrained way that you might have had on-prem. The situations you don't really want to have is someone to say, could you have done this on the old way? And you go, well, yeah, actually I could have. And then say, well, what was the benefit? That's not good. You want to be able to recognize what that twist was, the elements of the constraint or the value that you're getting from moving it up to the modern data platform. Those are the things that are going to be able to be recognized for the business for giving extra value, and that's where you're starting to separate up and show the real value from moving to a modern data platform. All right, so I'd just like to summarize thanks very much for having me on today. Modern data platform is for that constraint-free or removing the constraints and being able to get more data up and to be consumed in different ways to give value to the business. You got to look at the cost implications and identify which of those use cases is the right one, prioritize those use cases to get the best one for the business, and those low-hanging fruit, which we're happy and would love to support you going through those prioritization sessions and doing those design patterns and coming up with the costings for those. Let me just see, are there any questions? Let me go to the chat. Any questions? Q&A? I don't think so. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been great. Hopefully you've got something out of it. We've recorded that session. If you'd like a copy of that, let us know. If you'd like to chat to us about any of the things we talked about, we would love to hear from you. I mean, to be honest, we've been locked down in our different rooms across the place for several months now. We're desperate to talk to anybody, so we'd love to chat to anybody. This is a fun and interesting world we live in. Organisations are getting real value out of a modern data platform, especially ones that have chosen the right use case up front. And so that's really important. Make sure that you do the groundwork of getting the right use cases to move up there so that you can show the value on the other side. Your success is tied to the success of the use cases we find, or and so the more successful you are up front, the more successful you are downstream. Thanks very much for your time. Have a great day.